This is the exact pattern of history. When men drop the ball, especially when it comes to values, society is done.
Why is our culture tearing down the idea of strong men? When we understand, this is not a secret, that strong men equal strong communities and strong countries, why is there such a conflict between what's real and what kind of our cultural elite want us to believe?
85% of all prisoners, male and female, come from homes without a father. And 90% of all runaways run away from a house where there is no dad.
Our world is not a mess because there aren't good moms.
Exactly.
Our world is a mess because dads have walked away.
That's right.
And these moms have had to step into these roles. It's just not the way God created.
More than 95% of the bad actors, the kids that I dealt with on the streets, had an absent father at home.
How do we raise our own young men to have clarity around this understanding of manhood and be able to lead in a culture that's so kind of anti-biblical manhood?
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the March or Die Show. Today, this is the show where we do our very best every single episode to give you both the perspectives and principles you need to march when it would be easier to stay where you are and die. And we've got a great conversation in front of us today. My name is Jeremy Stalnecker, here with Sean Kennard, and I will introduce our guest in just a moment. But maybe you have noticed, I know you've noticed, we've talked about this a little bit, the world is a confusing place right now. It's a confusing place. A lot of people are looking around at the world, that is the world, but our world, people closer to home in our communities and really across our country. Culture is upside down. It's very, very confusing. And if you're like me and so many other people, sometimes you have to step back and ask the question, why is there so much confusion? Why is it so hard to know what's going on around here? It doesn't seem like it should be this difficult. But when you remove an understanding of our purpose, our design, who God created us to be, there is no alternative. We're going to be confused. And that's an important conversation to have. That's the one we're going to have today. Before we get there, though, if you have not yet subscribed to the show, please go ahead and do that right now. Subscribe right now. That would be fantastic. And if you are watching instead of listening, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Share this content out with others, and that would be fantastic. Our guest today, and if you're watching, don't laugh. I'm going to put my glasses on because I'm about 1 million years old. I can't see anything. Our guest today is Coach Kris Hogan. Kris has spent the last 25 years serving in senior educational administration. Coach has coached teams to 10 state championships and has been voted Coach of the Year 6 times at the regional level. I'm going to pause right there for a second. Football is a big deal in Texas. So this is a lot. Now, I'm from California. It doesn't mean as much. But in Texas, that means an awful lot.
Do they play football in California?
They do play football in California. Somebody asked me this the other day. California, it's a big state. Is football a big deal in California? I'm like, it's just another sport in California. But not out here.
That's a dagger statement.
That's a dagger statement.
We shut down towns for football, for high school football.
Your high school
Texas.
stadiums are bigger than our college stadiums.
Yeah, this is true.
Okay, but I'll get back to it. Coached teams to 10 state championships and has been voted Coach of the Year 6 times at the regional level. Coach was the subject of Remember Why You Play, a 2008 New York Times best-selling book by sports columnist and author David Thomas. Coach Hogan is a nationally sought-after speaker and has been featured on ESPN, ABC, NBC, and has been a guest speaker at the NFL Super Bowl breakfast alongside NFL greats Tony Dungy and Bart Starr, and has been the recipient of the National Sportsman of the Year by AT&T. Having recently stepped out of coaching, Coach stays busy as the director of culture for Cypress Christian High School, dropping a podcast every week and doing keynote speeches around the country. Coach, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Really
My
appreciate
blessing.
it.
Yeah,
It is awesome to be with you. We connected several months ago now, and you actually reached out to me, and a lot of the work that you're doing, there's some synchronicity, I think, between what you're doing and what we've been doing. But
Absolutely.
You live not too far from here.
Yeah,
and
Cypress.
so appreciate you coming down. Man, it's good to have you, and reading not only your bio, but getting on your website, and the things that you care about are the things that we care about. We work with veterans and service members and first responders, men's programs, women's programs. We work with families, but we understand fundamentally, and when we began primarily as a men's program. All of those other things have kind of blossomed out of that. And that was for one really simple reason. We understand that if men are strong and men are clear on their purpose and their design, all the things that you talk about, the rest of it comes in line. But man, we have a culture that is so upside down on this thing. And there's so much confusion. Talk a little bit about maybe kind of your beginning with this. You've coached young men. I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. You've been around this kind of hyper-masculine world for a long time. But what led you to this place of understanding, like, we've got to get men right?
Yeah, I think it was, even going back and growing up. As I grew up, I realized when I saw problems as a young teenager, you could almost put your finger on the fact that it was a man who failed to do what he ought to do. That's a good word. We ought. We ought to bring that word back.
Right.
But
right.
It's when a man just abdicated his responsibility, something happened. Something went wrong. I saw that in families. I saw it in my own family. I saw it with friends' families. And you see it on the national scene. And as I begin to get into coaching these young men, I saw it in all of their families' lives. When dad was right, everything lined up. When dad was off, it opened the door for so many issues. Because as you mentioned in your opening, it's the design piece. When the design is not right, there's not a lot of options that work with human beings. And so I begin to see all that. And then I got a double major in history. And of course, as you look back through history, you see immediately when men drop the ball, especially when it comes to values, society is done.
Yeah.
So that I saw all that as I was going through this process of growing up and coaching and getting more life experience. And so, that's how I kind of came to start to have a passion for that.
I love to hear you talk about that because obviously we all come from different backgrounds. I come from law enforcement, and I talk about this a lot when I'm talking to people about law enforcement, or somebody's asking me about, this topic that we're talking on today. And I would say more than 95% of the bad actors, the kids that I dealt with on the streets, had an absent father at home. They had a broken home at home. And again, the vast majority of that brokenness was the father that left the home or wasn't doing what he's supposed to be doing. It's overwhelming. I mean, everything you can think of, from the increased risk of incarceration, issues with suicide, drug dependency, all are vastly overwhelmed when it comes to not having a father present at home.
Well, you bring that up. I was doing a podcast the other day and just going through the research of trying to find the best analysis and the data from surveys you could trust, that you could feel good about, that could be verified.
Yeah.
The top three I found that were verifiable studies that did not have some political agenda behind them said 85% of all prisoners, male and female, come from homes without a father. Mm-hmm. And 90% of all runaways run away from a house where there is no dad.
Mm.
Think about that.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Incredible. Yeah.
A couple years ago, it's been more than a couple now, 3-4 years ago, myself and our programs director did a mini 3-day program, kind of what we do for veterans. We were asked to do that at Sentinel State Prison in California. Oh, wow. And so the warden there is a veteran, and he said, "Hey, I'd love for you guys to come. We've got a lot of veterans here. But we have one yard. And at Sentinel, it's the B yard. It's the life without the opportunity for parole men. These are rapists and murderers, and these are the people who are not going to get out. They're there." He said, "No one comes and does programs for them because there's no chance of them ever getting out. So all these organizations, they want to help people that are going to be able to transition and all that. So no one will do a program for them." So he made this deal with us. And the deal was, come do a program for them, and then you'll have access to the rest of the jail. That never worked out. So we did the program, I think, 3 times for the LWOP guys, which was fine. But we teach a class. It's called Legacy. And I was teaching it. So we're locked in. It's just me and Brandon Kunith, who works for us, locked in a gymnasium. There's a guard in a shack behind us, and then one on a catwalk above us, and then about 40 inmates. And again, rough group of people. And I'm teaching this class on legacy, which is crazy, right? I mean, look, what's your legacy going to be? Well, it's pretty apparent. But I asked the question, how many of you have parents who were also incarcerated? I think in that room of like 40 inmates, there were probably 2 that did not raise their hand. Isn't that crazy? And then I asked the next question, how many of you have kids that are also incarcerated? And it was over half the room. But when you think about the impact, and dads think I don't have an impact, particularly in this world that we live in, man, it's crazy.
That's a gut punch,
It's crazy. Why is there, so understanding that, there's a lot of statistics around that, a lot of data, research, we can just view it, watch it. Sure. We know it's true.
Yep.
we look at these communities where dads are absent and all of the problems that exist there. Why then are we having these conversations around toxic masculinity? Why is our culture tearing down the idea of strong men when we understand, this is not a secret, that strong men equals strong communities and strong countries? Why is there such a conflict between what's real and what kind of our cultural elite want us to believe?
There's two reasons, I think. Number one, this is the exact pattern of history. You've heard, and I know that you've probably read, seen, maybe did some historical study. People always compare America to Rome.
Sure.
Well, the reason why is because, this republic, democratic republic, rises up. You have this unbelievable world impact and influency, and then all of a sudden, the affluency and the impact start to dwindle, and then it disappears. And so the lifespan of these things are about 250 years. This is the pattern of the world. Why is that? And I think the reason is when you get to a certain affluent level in society, people lose their sense of purpose. Think about this. Your grandparents had to work differently than you to survive, to eat.
Yeah, right.
We've raised a generation and a half who can just exist and be richer than 99.9% of all the people who've ever lived. They literally lack purpose. Their parents stroke a check for them to go to Harvard.
Yeah.
And they go there. They don't have to fight for anything. And if you're not a believer, you're in real trouble because now you have no meaning. So there's four things wired into every human being: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. They're hardwired in: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. So everybody wants to know, how did we get here? Origin. Meaning, what am I supposed to do with my life? Morality, what's right and wrong? And destiny, where am I going to be just on the other side of my last breath? Well, if you have a secular worldview, you have a problem with every one of those. You have no meaning. So people will chase anything to acquire meaning. And so about 200 years go by, and there's a certain group that comes along who does not like, they want to complain about where they are, and they want to change it. And there's usually a revolution. And the revolution gives meaning to a lot of followers. And so that's why I think we are where we are. I mean, there are people yelling and screaming about the last election or about rights that they believe they need because somebody told them. Somebody taught them that at their academy. And so I think that's why we are here. You said it's so obvious, all the data says. I don't think it's really obvious to about a generation and a half. I don't think it's so obvious to a whole generation of Americans. You got to keep in mind, I'm in education. Sometimes I go to college campuses and talk. I was invited to talk to a college football team a couple of weeks back when they were playing at the end of their season. And I'm telling you, speaking on college campuses, you would be shocked what the average college student does not know about their country or what they believe about their country that's simply not true.
So it's not obvious because they're not looking, because they've been told to look somewhere else, because the truth has been pushed off in a corner. What's the reason it's not obvious? Because you can look at the inner cities of any large city and the fatherless rate and all of those things, all that data we always talk about. It seems obvious.
Let me tell you something about data. We changed the education system in the 1930s in the United States of America. Prior to that, we taught kids how to think. Sure. When the 1930s came along, we taught them how to learn what we tell you. You with me on that? You following the logic here? How to be a good student, how to learn. And so the reason we have problems in the inner city is because, and then just fill in the blank. This is what we're teaching you.
Yeah.
So crime, poverty, historical racism. You just fill in the blanks of what it is. Let me tell you something. It doesn't matter what color you are, what creed, what ethnicity, what religion. When dad's at home and doing right, the family's going to be good. All historical evidence says that. That is the issue. But that's not what they're told. So they grow up and they believe what they learned. They were taught to learn.
I'm curious for you to expand on that a little bit. You've seen that as an educator. You've seen that being rolled out in the education system. Is that correct?
Yes, but not where I work, because I work in private education.
Yeah,
Christian education.
I'm curious, just as a note for a listener, and this isn't to bash anybody who has a child in public school.
Right,
but
absolutely not.
What would you say to somebody, because I get this question asked to me a lot. public school, private school, I can't afford it, homeschool. Like as a, you know, what I would consider a lifelong educator, how would you counsel somebody on wrestling with, okay, I see this epidemic that we're facing. I don't want my child to be affected by this epidemic. However, I live in a household where both parents have to work. You know, like what would you, how would you counsel somebody on, if they have to be in the public education system, what's the best way for them to navigate that? And then it's maybe some options for them outside of the public education system.
Well, first thing you have to make sure that everybody understands it's the parent's job to educate their kid. It is not the local school district. It's not the state of Texas. And for sure, it's not Washington, D.C. It's the parent's job. That's who was entrusted with that child.
Yeah.
So I would say this. It would be very difficult for me to send my own kid to a large public school where there was not a conservative/Christian influence. There are a lot of great public schools, but they're mostly smaller. When you get above a certain population or in a certain urban area, you're going to have to deprogram your kid every single day or recognize that your child will not have Judeo-Christian ethics. You're going to have to deprogram them. I have seen a lot of good kids come out of large public schools because they have intentional Christian parents. But you better be working overtime and you better be super involved. It's interesting because there's a lot of small schools where the parents in the town determine who's on that school board. They are the school board. They determine the curriculum.
Right. That's right.
I have a someone I better not name here, but there's a person I know that I'm very close to. He and his wife live in a small rural Texas community. The school hired an English teacher, and in the middle of the first quarter, the superintendent walked in, pulled her out of class, and said, "You're fired." Because the school board said, these are the values of this community, and you're here to enforce it. So that's what I would say. Small schools, you have much more control than large schools. Homeschooling is actually not a bad option. It's not a bad option. Your kids can play sports in homeschool all over, where you couldn't in the past. But I would just say you have to be super involved, and you have to be ready to deconstruct ideas that come into your kid's mind if they're in public school. I'm not saying all public schools are bad. There's a lot of conservative Christian public schools.
Yeah.
But you have to know that,
That's
as
good.
a parent.
That's good.
When you talk about these issues, defining terms is really important. And I think for a lot of people, there's confusion around terms like masculinity, toxic masculinity, biblical masculinity, these terms that we would use, and I think we would have some understanding of what they mean. Can you do two things? Can you define kind of those terms? What is toxic masculinity from where you sit, or what is meant by that? What's the difference or the contrast between that and biblical masculinity? And then how do we let's start with our own kids. I've got two boys. One he's a 23-year-old police officer, so I hope he's all right, but I want to continue to mentor him.
If he's a police officer, he's the most masculine person that ever stepped foot on the earth.
He's definitely confused, so I need to continue to work with him. But then I want to continue to mentor my son, but I have a 15-year-old football player, actually, who's coming up, and I want to help him. And so let's define the terms, and then how do we raise our own young men to have clarity around this understanding of manhood and be able to lead in a culture that's so kind of anti-biblical manhood.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, there's actually no such thing as toxic masculinity. Right. It's just made up.
Sure.
It's, when you want to revolutionize a society, the first thing you do is hijack language.
Mm-hmm. That's why I think it's so important to define terms.
Yep. Yeah. Number one. So, but what is meant by it is we have it's an anti-Christian, anti-American traditional American values. It's an anti-revolution in the country. It's really a far left revolution, similar to what was created in 1917 in Russia, to be honest with you. But the bottom line is it is anti-American, anti-Bible. And you're a toxic male if you disagree with our main tenets. That's really what they mean.
Right.
When you disagree with us and you do traditional masculinity or Judeo-Christian ethics as your platform, you're toxic. That's how they define that.
It's against the country and against the Bible. Mm-hmm. If someone were screaming outside of our doors right now about toxic masculinity, most of the time what they would believe that means is It's the kind of masculinity that is abusive to women and children. It's that over the top, hypersexualized masculinity. But you're saying it's something else.
I am. I'm saying when you disagree with my revolutionary agenda, I'm going to label you.
Right.
And
right.
part of that labeling is toxic, misogynist, racist, intolerant.
But the actual intention of the person who really believes in this idea of toxic masculinity, it's not to tear down a misogynist or a racist or anyone else. It's to label a strong person so that they can't have the same impact on the country and the same impact in terms of Christian values. So it really is a shell game that they're playing with language.
Yes, because what happens is a person can be disregarded as soon as they're racist.
Yeah.
Oh, we're not going to, he's racist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this guy's like Hitler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a misogynist.
Yeah.
If you label people correctly, then you give permission for millions of people to disregard their opinion.
Right.
So instead of taking on the idea, you don't want to have the idea, so let's just get rid of the person.
Yeah.
That's where I think toxic masculinity falls into that. You mentioned, what's the kind of the opposite of masculinity or of toxic masculinity, which is of course biblical masculinity is what I would say.
Right.
But when they say toxic masculinity, notice there's no such thing as toxic femininity.
Sure.
It only goes one way. I think there are a lot of moms who maybe abandon their kids, get strung out on drugs, do all this stuff. They don't call it toxic. Bad behavior is bad behavior. And it goes back to what you said. There's an attack on males specifically.
Right.
And because there's a Judeo-Christian theme that says, like, for instance, a male would be the leader of his household spiritually and in multiple other ways. Well, the way you get rid of that is you demean that person. So you say toxic masculinity. But there's confusion two ways on masculinity that I see in the culture. I bet you guys see it too. Number one, we have a lot of nice guys in the United States of America that are not good at being men.
For sure. Yeah.
They're nice men, but they're not good at being men.
These are what we call beta males, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
They're wonderful people, love
great
them,
guy.
like hanging out with them.
Right.
Don't want to take them to a fight.
Right. Wants everybody to get along, striving to make sure every voice is heard all the time, can't decide where we want to go to dinner. What do you like? Oh, what time you want me to pick you up? Can't make a decision, indecisive. Yeah. That's what they're saying become. Don't be toxic, be this guy.
Right.
But in reality, that's not how the world works. In reality, that's the guy who goes on 3 or 4 dates and she says, I really like you, but I just want to be friends. Right, because you act just like her friends.
Yeah.
There's no differentiation between you, right? And so we have what I would say are soft beta males. And that's what a whole generation acts like and talks like. Believe me, I go to a college campus, I'm talking to football players they're Division I athletes. They are a different genetic code than almost everybody you're talking to.
Yeah.
I mean, they may not work out much in their life and they're just rocked.
Yeah.
But in a conversation, they're a beta male. Because they have been trained through all their gender studies classes or whatever they're taking at college. This is how you act, right? You say these things and you do these things. But all the time I'm looking in their eyes and there's a primal dude in there who feels just bottled up by all this soft language. So we have that kind of masculinity problem. The other side of that, I think, is a pendulum issue. So Andrew Tate and everybody on that side, they have seized on the fact, and they don't like that. None of us like to be boxed up.
Right.
I can tell right now, you guys, we're kind of cut from the same cloth. You're not going to get boxed up in this soft, effeminate male stuff.
Yeah.
And so my natural inclination is actually to say, no, I'm going the opposite way.
Yeah.
And if you are not encumbered by Christian ethics, you get the Andrew Tates of the world.
Yeah.
So those are two visions of masculinity. So you have a guy that's good at being a man, but he's not a good man.
Yeah.
And then you have the good man who's not good at being a man.
Yeah.
And the ideal man is God's man.
That's good.
He's the guy who is good at being a man, and he's a good man. He has a moral compass, and he's a decisive, action-oriented guy who gets things done. It's the guy who weeps with children and flips over tables when he needs to.
Right.
That's right.
That's good.
I'm curious, you hit on this earlier, Jeremy. So in your experience in, coaching, the type of man that you should feel like you could create this ideal man, the man we're talking about,
Right.
How do you help bring those attributes out of that person?
Define it. He couldn't have said it any better. The terms need definition. So here's what I told all of my football players for years. The perfect football player is a gentleman warrior. When you go to science class and you stay after to help the teacher clean up the beakers, and it's yes ma'am and no ma'am, and you keep order, because that's somebody's mom and somebody's wife up there teaching. We're not going to let this dude in the back corner harass her.
Yeah.
So you help her in the class, you stay after, yes ma'am, no ma'am. She should think, what a gentleman. But she should not be able to recognize you when the ball is snapped.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like you're coming out of a cage. She should be thinking, that's little Johnny that stays after. That's the perfect man. And I use Jesus as the model.
Yeah.
I use Jesus as the model. Gentleman, warrior. And then you explain that. And there's other attributes. I will say things like this. Men are judged by their action. Quit talking about it. Men do things. The world belongs to the doers.
Yeah.
James chapter 1, verse 22, be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving your own self. You are deceived if all you do is listen to good information.
Yeah.
You got to go make it happen. I'll tell you 3 kinds of people in the world: people who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and people who don't know what's happening. and believe me, we're going to slide on another ring because we make things happen.
Yeah.
And so that I just gave you a mini lesson before we go out to practice. Aren't you ready to make something happen now?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right. So then you do that day after day after day after day, and you just drip it. Yeah. Habits are caught more than they're taught. That's why all those people raise their hand. Yes, my parents there, and yes, my kid's incarcerated. Habits are caught. So you make a habit of being a man. You show up every day, and you're a doer. And you just teach the lessons like that, and you just make that the base of your program. It's just what we do every day.
Yeah.
Listen, I didn't coach football because I'm in love with football. I'm in love with my wife. I use football to build men. Yeah. It is the best platform I am aware of because it requires all the things that make a great husband and a great dad and a great leader and a great business owner and a great American. You have to sell out for a cause bigger than yourself. You have to put in the work. You can't trick your way to the top. There's no negotiating and there's no attorneys. You can't win unless you're the best.
That's right.
You have to fail and get up and do it again, and fail and get up and do it again. Sound like real life to you?
Oh, yeah.
Right. You have to understand trust in the locker room. You have to build collaboration. Yep. You have to look yourself in the mirror. Yep. I mean, it's a perfect laboratory to build the next generation of leaders. So that's why I coach football.
So that's principally, that follows everywhere you go. I think that process for training and learning the habits, everything that you just talked about, but kind of at a granular level, what do I do with my, there's a young couple listening, young man's listening. Let's say he wasn't taught right. He doesn't have a model to follow, but he wants his son to have a different life than he had. Mm-hmm. What practically does that young dad need to do throughout the life of this young man to create a biblical man or a young man that has an understanding of biblical manhood?
Such a great question. So I'm wrapping up right now the completion of something called the 4 Pillars of Parenting.
That's great.
It's a digital product, and we're about to launch this. And there are 4 pillars of parenting. And if you do these 4 pillars, it's straight from the Bible. If you lay the foundation, these pillars, it doesn't guarantee that your child will turn out exactly how you have desired them to turn out. It doesn't guarantee success. I mean, you know this.
Sure.
The best of parents. Yeah, and sometimes you see the kid and it's like, what? How did this happen?
How did that happen?
Or
must have been his mom.
Right.
That's what I would say.
or else you see a high achieving kid coming from a family you didn't expect that.
Yeah.
So obviously, you're an independent agent, right?
Sure.
A kid can do what they want. But if you lay these 4 pillars, you give them the best chance, because every time one of these pillars is lost, you open the door for problems. Okay, so the first thing I would tell that young couple is authority. Make sure authority is in place. Because think about it, who do you answer to? Because I'd be a different person if I didn't believe there was a God and I had to answer to him. Wouldn't you?
Sure.
There's no telling what I would be doing.
100%.
I'd probably be in a fight today.
Yeah. Sure.
Because it's fun. I don't know why I'm wired that way. It's just the way it is. Right? So, and maybe that's not everybody's problem, but everybody has problems.
Sure.
We're all born sinners.
Yeah.
But there's an authority.
Yeah.
That's the first. I mean, think about what the Bible says. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, there's a God and I'm not him.
Right.
So you have to get the authority piece in, right? There's nothing worse than watching a 4-year-old throw a tantrum and the parents can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
There's also nothing worse than a 17-year-old who has a huge allowance and drives a Land Rover and doesn't honor or respect his parents.
Yeah.
In both of those situations, somebody put love before authority.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the way it works. That's why God started the 10 Commandments with, I'm God. Let's start there. He didn't say, I love you. He said, I'm God. There's only one and I'm him. By the way, I'm jealous.
Right.
So he just set the whole stage with authority, right? In fact, I would go so far as to say this. The entire planet works on authority. That is the law of gravity. And my friend, it is authoritative.
You can't get around it.
Yeah.
You can try and you're going to get hurt or kill yourself. So the whole world operates because authority that God created. So number one, authority.
Yeah, that's good.
Learn to say no. This is who we are. This is what our last name means. We're not going to do that. I'm not going to explain it to you. You're fine because I said so is actually a good answer, right? And we go to church on Sunday and we listen to him. You got to establish authority. The second thing is alliances. It is so powerful to align yourself with like-minded people. That's actually the beauty of where I work, Christian education. When those parents drop that child off, they know the teacher has a biblical worldview. They see the world the way the teacher does. The principals have the same value system. And the kids in the classroom supposedly have the same value system. Not always, but you certainly improve the... You want your Little League Baseball coach to have the same morals you do. Right? Think about that.
Absolutely.
You would love for your kids' coaches to believe like you do.
Yeah.
So alliances are very, very important.
Yeah.
The third thing is values. Make the value system crystal clear for your kids. And how to, of course, the biblical values are the best.
Yeah.
Right? No question about that. And then finally, habits. I'll say these again. Habits. You make life about habits because the golden rule of life is you first make your habits and then your habits make you.
Yep.
So to raise a child, teach them authority.
Yep.
It's first from God and then from parents and then from all other authorities, right? Like the Bible teaches in Romans. Secondly, get a great alliance with everybody around you. Grandparents, neighbors, friends, family, school, church, alliances. Third, make the values crystal clear. And finally, build a life where all of those things are the habits. That's how you give your kid the best opportunity to succeed.
I'd like to drill down on all four of those.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this question. So the other end of this. I am a 18, 19, 20-year-old young man.
Yeah.
And somewhere, for some reason, the light went on. And I can look at my own family and my own situation and go, that is not what I want. I want something different for my life, but I don't even know where to start.
Mm-hmm.
How do I become a biblical man if I'm, again, in that place? I don't even know where to start. Maybe I accepted Christ through a club on college campus or whatever, but I'm not connected to anything. I'm just trying to figure this thing out. Where do I start? How do I become that person?
Number one thing, go get a mentor immediately.
Where do you
find in the church?
Yeah.
Go find the guy you want to be.
Find the guy you want to be.
That's
good.
right.
Yeah.
That is the rule. It doesn't matter if it's money, spiritually, family orientation. It doesn't matter what it is. Find the guy you want to be.
Yep.
Every Christian who is established and mature should have a Paul and a Timothy. Go find a Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Just recognize, I don't have what I want, but I do know what I want. And the first thing I would say is go find that guy and say to him what you just said. What guy, what man would not love to have somebody say, look, sir, here's my background, but I see you. I don't know how to do it, but I see you.
That's good.
Will you help me?
Yeah.
Who would say no?
Yeah.
That's good.
Nobody's going to say no.
Yeah.
Because inside of us, we want to protect and we want to help, and we all good men
And
want
if
to
they
help.
say no,
Wrong guy.
that's the wrong guy.
probably
Wrong guy.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Go find the guy you want to be. That's
good.
where I'd say start right there. The second thing I would say
That's
is,
good.
second thing I would do what you know is right now, even if you don't know a lot. Do you know that it's right to be in church every Sunday? You think that's going to help you? Okay, don't miss. All the things that you know to do them.
That's good.
Because those create scenarios.
Yeah. And put you around the right people, which you talked about when you're raising a young person.
Community.
Those alliances, right?
Yeah, exactly. Community is another big part of it. There's this saying going around the last decade that you're going to be the combination of 5 people you hang out with the most.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, now you look at your friend circle and like, this is a problem. This guy. Right. So, your community, but go find that guy is number one.
Yeah. Find the guy, get in the right community.
Because he'll open all the
Do
doors
what
for
you know is right to do.
That's it.
That's good.
Yep, that's it.
How important, I want you to kind of backtrack a little bit for the parents.
Sean learned a little slower than the rest of us.
Yeah, I learned much slower than I've been punched in the head a lot.
And go back a little bit.
Yeah, so I need you to go back a little bit. For the parents who are listening, even for the young men who are listening, how important is adversity and hardship? You mentioned this earlier. We live in a world where, unless you manufacture adversity, it's not there. We can order McDonald's to our studio if we wanted to.
Oh yeah.
We can order anything we want from Amazon.
Uber driver would walk right in here with a bag
he would.
Bag of French fries.
Absolutely. Groceries. I can get groceries delivered to my front door. Not only do I not have to go and kill the food that I eat now I don't even have to go to the grocery store anymore.
That's right.
And so
this is such a great question.
Coming from a world of sports and leading men and being obviously a successful multi-championship coach, how important
in Texas, nonetheless.
In Texas, just so we're clear, the most competitive.
Talk to me.
The most competitive. There are high school Texas teams that can beat NFL teams. Anyways, so
I was with him for a while.
Okay, maybe I stretched.
That's all right.
The most competitive state in football, period. But how important is adversity and how important is it for parents nowadays to actually manufacture adversity for our children?
So I'm even going to take it. I'm going to even go a step further, 3 levels deeper. Forget sports for a second.
Yeah.
It takes adversity to raise a man. Pressure is a non-negotiable. That is not the case with women. Okay, so I'm going to, ready for me to be politically incorrect? Correct?
Let's do it.
So real quick, it takes pressure to build. There's no other way. Pressure has to be present.
Let me
that's
explain.
An absolute statement. Yeah.
Let me explain it.
I agree with you.
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not dodging a question. I'm going to say yes.
Yeah.
Let me explain this to you. If you go back and do a historical study, about 6,000 years of written history. I don't know how long we've been on planet Earth, by the way. I'm not claiming to know. I don't know if we've been here 100,000 or what. All I know is everybody learned to write about 6,000 years ago. So do whatever you want with that. So 6,000 years of world history, okay? All over the globe, no matter the continent, you pick the continent, communities found out that it worked better when there was an initiation process for young men, for boys to become men. They were often physical, grueling, cruel, painful. There is no such corresponding thing for young ladies. And let me explain why. If you just leave a girl alone and keep her alive, she's going to turn into a woman. It doesn't matter her background. If you'll just keep her alive and let her have what we would say is normal, she's got enough food, she's got clothes, she's in the local school, she'll grow up and be a woman. It's not how it works with men. That's why there's no such joke as a 40-year-old lady living in her mom's basement. It's the 40-year-old pajama boy. Okay?
Because I've never even thought of that before.
No, you don't think about it.
Powerful.
You don't think about it.
Yeah.
Because boys are built. Girls are grown. A boy has to be built. Okay? Adversity and pressure are excellent for boys. They're excellent for boys. Listen, let me give you this one. The Bible says a man shall leave his mother and his father,
right?
Then join his wife, and the two will become one flesh. There's no such statement to women.
Right.
Why is that? Because little girls are born to leave. A boy has to be kicked in the back out the door. Get out. He'll sit in there and play video games if you let him. You have to build a boy. Matter of fact, even in vitro, every fetus, every conception, science tells us is a female. And then there's this, to simplify it, there's this shot of testosterone like something, and the baby shakes and fights, and on the other side of it, you have a little boy. Even in vitro, there's pressure to become a man. That's how you build men.
Yeah.
Men who go and work and accomplish and achieve, that's how you build yourself into. Think about it. You go into law enforcement or you go into the military. All these military guys know this. You show up and the first thing they do is make you look like everybody else and then pound you into submission. They're putting all kinds of pressure on you. What kind of training is the hardest? The most elite. So your Navy SEALs, your Rangers, the highest level had the most pressure. Right. The most pressure builds the highest level. Boys are built. Adversity is Non-negotiable when you're building a boy. So yes, did we use football for that? Absolutely. I wished I had a video that could show a mat room in off season in January or February. I wished you could see it. I think it would shock you. I think you would want to go see it in person to see what they're doing in there. They're diving full length, 4 feet like Superman, hitting on their stomachs and sliding and turning backflips and diving. And they're doing things that no sane human would do.
Yeah.
We're creating pressure. And so that's the point of it.
Yeah.
Pressure is a non-negotiable for a man. There's nothing wrong with feeling pressure to provide for your family. It usually makes you perform. But we're in a day and age where we want to protect our kids from things, right? I mean, did your parents know where you were at nighttime when you were growing up in the summer?
No, not usually.
I mean,
my parents
mine
had no
weren't even
clue.
home most of the days.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Right. We're riding our bikes. We're doing all kinds of stuff. We're out of sight. Today, we would never parent like we did back then because we want to keep everybody in a bubble.
Right.
Right. So we have soft men.
Yeah.
Because we try to keep pressure off of them. I like to create pressure.
Sports is a good way to do that, and it's an easy way to understand that. What do you do with someone who, not every man, even strong men, are necessarily athletic? Where do you create the pressure for a kid who doesn't want to?
He nailed it. You manufacture it. You create hard things. Like we made our kids, my boys give me all kinds of heck today. They joke. It's just running joke after running joke with all my ridiculous one-liners when they were growing up. But so they push mowed lawns, right? Because this is not the easiest thing, especially when they're doing it at 10. So it's very difficult to push it. But after they do it and you high five them and say, that is awesome. There's no other 10-year-olds today doing what you're doing. I can do it. Our neighbor can do it. This man can do it. But kids in your class don't do it. Give me a high five. Let's go get an ice cream.
Yeah.
So you see what I just did? I appealed to his macho-ism. And I think that's a key to building men, by the way. Appeal to what's naturally in them.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a thing in our football program called Open for Thursday. It's the day before the game. It's a light practice. And we just get in a circle and we just talk. If you have an issue with somebody, you say it out loud right now. You do Matthew 18. And this is what I tell them. 6th grade cheerleaders and 80-year-old women gossip. Men don't gossip. If you got a problem with somebody, you tell them now.
Right.
It's no problem. We'll leave this room. We'll shake hands. You see what I'm doing?
Yeah.
I'm appealing to what's naturally in them.
That's good.
So I think pressure is great. And you can manufacture. I mean, you go out and tell a kid you're going to build whatever you want to build, have him help you chop down trees. You don't want to give them tasks they can't do.
Yeah.
But I think manual labor, I think work is like the best. But make it fun.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think you nailed it. You have to manufacture pressure. And I had to do that before my kids were playing competitive sports.
Yeah.
Just manufacture it.
That's
Let's rake leaves together for a while.
What's your faith background? Where'd you come to Christ? Was that a family thing?
So I'm very blessed in one area. Both sets of my grandparents, lifelong dedicated Christians.
That's great.
So talking about a pretty good little heritage there.
That's great heritage.
My parents divorced when I was 11. That was extremely tough. It was kind of awkward actually because we didn't have very many divorces in our family. And that was crushing to me. I've got to be honest with you. That was a tough challenge.
Yeah. Sure.
But when I was 11 years old, the summer, several months after the divorce happened, I went to like a old-fashioned revival. And I'm there, and I'm a hurt little boy, right? I'm 11 years old. I'm definitely hurt, confused, and man, no question about it. I remember where I was. I remember what it felt like. I remember that whole day. Growing up in church, of course, you don't take your parents' salvation with you, clearly.
Yeah. Right.
But at age 11, distinctly, I was called.
Yeah.
I could feel God pulling me when they gave the invitation. I just had to go.
Yeah.
And I went and repented of my sins. And
Why did you go to that revival? Was that your grandparents that took you to that?
it was associated with my grandparents.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was associated with my grandparents.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how often that's the case.
Yeah, yeah.
That heritage. Yeah, we can't adopt our parents or our grandparents' faith. We have a personal relationship with Christ. We have to respond to that. But man, when your family understands that, it changes everything.
Oh, it's huge. And my mom did an unbelievable job of helping me fall in love with God's word. Because when I was a little boy, she told me all the stories and read me Bible stories. So I thought Samson was the coolest guy, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. But that was a huge impact on me as well.
Coach, there's a lot there to unpack.
Yeah.
We got a lot. We need to do this 3 or 4 more times just to come back and work through some of it.
I love everything that you're saying. And I think it is such an important topic. And I think it's a time that we're in a time where we need this more than ever. What's the saying? You guys know the saying, weak men create
Strong men
create
good times.
Yeah.
Good times create weak men. Weak men create tough times.
There you go.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think we are in the weak men create tough times. And so, I mean, I just love this topic. I love what we're talking about because I think it is so important. I don't think there is anything more important right now in today's time than calling men to step up and lead, because I think that I think honestly, and I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this, I think even the radical feminism movement actually stems from the lack of leadership in men. I think that our churches today are failing because of a lack of leadership in men. I think we are finding that women are running our communities, our churches, and our leadership aspects of our communities, less because I think that there's this women out there pounding their chest, but more because I think over time there has been such a decline of real men leading.
And abdicated.
Yes, right. And so now women have almost had to step into a role, and that has created, right, because of the broken design, has created now this what we would now see as like a radical feminism. But I think it actually stemmed from a lack of leadership in men today.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is it's evidence of that. In education, I've dealt with a lot of discipline issues, as you can imagine. 25 years, you see a lot, right? Yeah. In 90% of issues that we've had with discipline with boys, 90% of the time, the dad is either absent, weak, or has abdicated his role. 9 out of 10 times that a boy's a problem, dad falls into one of those categories. He's either not there, he's super weak, or has abdicated some fatherly role, and now we got a problem.
Yeah.
And so guess what? I've also seen some incredible moms step in and fill the gap. And I've also seen some incredible most of the families that we deal with are awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm super blessed at Cypress Christian.
Right. Sure.
Super blessed.
Sure.
Everybody's intact. Everybody's got their roles. Things are great moms, great dads, But no question about it, that plays out in every area of society, and that's one example.
Yeah.
Men abdicate their roles, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And I think it is important just to acknowledge, kind of in passing as we go through this, none of this is to say there aren't incredible single moms
absolutely
out there.
No doubt.
But what has to be remembered, I think, in any conversation about creation and design is there's the way God created it. And then there are, opportunities for God to demonstrate grace to people because they're in difficult situations that aren't according to his design, but he equips them to do it. And, I think that's important as well to remember some amazing moms and grandmothers and others who step up and really make things happen.
I think what we're talking about is the ideal.
But we're talking about the ideal.
Yeah.
Our world is not a mess because there aren't good moms.
Exactly.
Our world is a mess because dads have walked away.
That's right.
And these moms have had to step into these roles. That's just not the way God created it.
And for clarity, I'm not saying that there's not a place for women to be leading in our communities. There absolutely is.
Absolutely,
but I think that the detriment is that there are not men leading, right. And that's I think that's the current problem.
I love that Old Testament story of Deborah, and I think people look at that story a little bit. I think they look at it wrong, right? The Old Testament story of Deborah, she was a prophetess, and God used her. And the leader of the army came to her and said, "We need to go to battle. Will you lead us?" She said, "I'll do it, but a man should do it. So when God gives us victory, you're not going to get the credit for it." I love that story because
it's awesome.
In that moment, she said, "Yeah, I can step up and do this if you're not willing to." And then he ended up doing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
think about the power and wisdom of that.
Everyone's going to know that a woman did this because that's not the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, there's so much more we could say here. Intentionality. If you're a young parent, be very intentional about how you're raising your kids. Understand the end. The end isn't to get through today. The end is to get them out into society, into culture, making a difference, being the person God created them to be. If you're a young man, start where you are. Find the guy you want to be.
That's right.
And do what you know is right to do. Get yourself in a good community. So much here. Don't let culture force its definitions on you. I think that's important in this conversation as well. Yeah. They're going to. Don't let it happen. And always, always, always start with God's intended purpose and God's design, that blueprint we find in the Bible, that's always the starting point. God can do whatever he wants to. He does. He equips people that find themselves in very difficult places, but God has a place. Coach, where can people follow you, learn more about the work that you do? And man, there's so much. I feel like we should be.
This is only part one.
This is part one.
Yeah.
But you have a lot of content that people can just get a hold of, your podcast, other resources that you produced, books that you're part of, other projects. Where can people go to find that?
AtomicMasculinity.com. AtomicMasculinity.com. Yeah.
All right.
And if you don't want to shout it out now, that's totally fine. But what you're working on, this project you're working on,
the 4 pillars of parenting.
Will that be on Atomic Masculinity?
It will.
Okay.
We're rolling through the final stages of that. We're going to do a pre-launch and start it pretty soon.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that myself.
Yep.
It's be good.
Awesome. Good stuff. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
For those of you that are watching, subscribe. For those of you that are listening, same thing. Subscribe. Subscribing, it lets you get this content as soon as it's pushed out. We want to make sure that you have it. So go ahead and do that. Take some time, jump over to lifeaudio.com. You can find some great podcasts there as well. And very grateful for the partnership there. And I will remind you before we finish up today, as I do every single episode, when the bullets are flying your direction, when it feels like your world is falling apart, you only have 2 choices, just 2, not 1,000, not 100, 2. You can stay where you are and die. You can make that decision. You can raise the white flag. You can give up. You can stay where you are and die, or you can do the better thing, put one foot in front of the other and march. But the decision is always yours. So the question, what are you going to do? All right. Look forward to talking to you next time.